All right, we've got more than enough for a quorum. We're going to go ahead and start the meeting. I know that for many, this is standing between them getting home to spouses for Valentine's Day, so we're going to start. Today, we're going to take up House Bill 83. You should find those in your folders. LC 390347. And real quickly, I'm going to ask Vice Chair to, if he's going to help present. He was the co-sponsor of this bill with me, but being a realtor, he understands this. And I'm going to ask him, and if Keith Hatcher from the Georgia Association of Realtors will go up, and we're going to hear testimony on the bill. And I'd like to, tell the committee this is exactly what we are, a great example of what we should be doing in here. This is the reason for this bill is unintended consequences of something we've done. Is a great example of how it's affecting small businesses throughout everyone's district, throughout every county in the state of Georgia. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Vice Chair. Representative Clark, if you will start and tell us what House Bill 83 is about.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, thank you. As bring before you HB 83, LC 390347. As the chairman just mentioned, it really is a privilege to get to be a co-sponsor on this good piece of legislation with Chairman Knight, because I think, as he just mentioned, this really epitomizes what this committee and why we're all excited to serve on it, to help eliminate and reduce red tape and often unintended consequences of legislation on small businesses. And as Chairman Knight mentioned, businesses in all of our districts, in fact, 86,000 individual small businesses that this piece of legislation can affect. In this case, HB 83 clears up some unintended consequences in legislation that was passed several years ago, known as the SAFE Act, or the Mortgage Broker Licensing Act, that was designed to enhance consumer protection and reduce fraud by establishing standards for the licensing and registration of mortgage loan originators. After the bill was passed, it was brought to the realtors' attention by the Georgia Department of Banking with their concern that realtors who are assisting their clients in a short sale transaction may be unknowingly violating the Georgia Residential Mortgage Act, and if they are not a licensed mortgage loan originator. So in other words, you can have a realtor such as myself, who's simply helping a homeowner sell their home through a short sale. I'm sure we've probably all heard of short sales. That's a lot of what's going on right now with home sales, our short sales. Can simply be helping someone through that and risk being guilty of a felony. So this is an important piece here, I believe. Realtors, feel that when they're assisting with a short sale, they're simply, incidental to the Mortgage Broker Licensing Act. They're simply just helping their client through the process of the short sale and providing information to that bank or the person holding the note. I should point out that the banks are accustomed to working with agents. I've done short sales. I mean, it's a normal process of the banks working with the agent in the process. So this has been kind of took the realtors by shock when we realized that we could be putting ourselves in jeopardy. HB in closing here, HB eliminates the red tape in the current law, HB 83, and ensures that realtors can continue to represent sellers to help avoid in foreclosure. It's a result of an agreement we're proud of between the Georgia Department of Banking and Finance and the Georgia Realtors are all in agreement on this. We have with us today to help answer any questions that you may have representatives of the Georgia Association of Realtors, Keith sitting right here beside me, Hatcher, and the Georgia Banking Department to help address any concerns.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I want to make sure we understand it. The 80-something thousand small businesses. This is our realtors, and basically to sum this thing up is when our realtors are helping in these potential sales with residents who have short sales. In other words, they're sort of underwater with their loans. In that process, they've got to fill out some information that goes back through back to the mortgage folks. And in that process, just because the realtor is there and is incidental to this and in helping with the information, they're getting called up under this act. And that's what we're trying to correct here. And I want to make sure everyone understands that. In fact, I'm going to ask Keith. I know there were some instances, even in South Carolina. This is other states that are having issues like this. I think South Carolina, someone was arrested.
Yes, that's correct.
And then also tell us what in regards to the federal.
First of all, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for your sponsorship of the legislation. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk about it. As you point out, and as Mr. Clark points out, it's really ideally suited for this committee because it's really a red tape issue. What had happened is we adopted the SAFE Act in reference to the federal act. We adopted that here in the state of Georgia, and that act says that if you attempt to modify a loan, you must be licensed as a mortgage broker. And then under the separate law that regulates real estate brokers, there's an exception in law for real estate brokers. So my brokers are in the marketplace helping people with short sales. And then the banking department came along and said, well, if you provide information to the lender that they then use to decide whether they're going to sell the property, from a banking world perspective, we see that as modifying the loan. So it's really sort of two world views. The banking department, which completely understand, their job is to regulate bankers. So they see that transaction not so much as a real estate sale, they see it as a modification of a loan. We see it as a real estate sale. So we're simply trying to help that person to sell the house. The best news is the banking department, when they recognized this conflict, came to us and said, we don't want you to stop doing this, because if realtors cannot do this, we don't get more short sales, we get more foreclosures. So they have worked very diligently, and I want to thank Mr. Rod Carnes, the Deputy Commissioner here today. He met with us on numerous occasions. We tried a rule at one point. We're going to try to resolve this through the rulemaking process. That fell a little bit short, and we came to the conclusion that we're going to need to amend the law to make it perfectly clear that our role, so far as we're only helping that person as part of the real estate deal and not charging a separate fee, then we are not violating the Mortgage Broker Licensing Act. So we come to you today very excited about a solution that all parties can support, and appreciate your support. I'm more than happy to answer any specific questions, but as the chairman points out, there have been 4 other states that have dealt with this problem. All of them have similar language that they put into the law to make clear that a real estate broker can assist in a short sale without having to go out and get a mortgage broker's license.
Okay, thank you. With that, I'll look to the committee for questions, and I apologize. I'm not. Who's 24? Representative Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Clark, I appreciate being on this committee. I'm learning a lot on this committee in the short time I've been on it. Could you briefly tell me what is a short sale?
Yes. Great question. A short sale is where the proceeds from the sale of the property will be less than the mortgage that's owed on the property. So in that case, some of the information that we might provide, like one I did recently, where we'll do our own, the bank will have an appraiser go out there, but they'll also look to us for comps. They'll look to us for information on how many lookers we're having on the property to help them decide how often they're going to lower the price on the property and help that seller get out from under an underwater mortgage. Because like in this case, the last one I did, they owed $430,000, and the property, they had bought it at the peak, and it was a terrible deal at that point even, but now it was worth about $150,000. So, but that property sat vacant for a couple of years until I was able to help the homeowner with and go between them and the bank and just provide the information that they were asking for. They were accustomed to working with a realtor. It was kind of scary, though, when I began to realize that instead of being down here, I could have been in jail for unknowingly committing a felony. So I appreciate y'all's help with this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And who's 18?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And the part about modifying the loan is you say the property's not worth what the mortgage, and the bank agrees to accept that amount to satisfy the debt.
Correct.
Or what's left of the debt, or however they do it. So that's why you're talking about the loan modification, because it's really, instead of owing the $400,000 now, it's 140 or whatever you can get the property sold for, and the bank's saying, okay, we made the loan, got all the 400,000, but we're going to take the 100 and some and say we're done with it.
Exactly. Otherwise, for instance, this property would have gone in foreclosure, and they would have most likely have gotten even less, and would have hurt the community greater.
You wouldn't have looked good in stripes either, Josh.
I concur. Thank you.
Representative Pizzolo.
Just a little anecdote. My wife is a realtor as well, and so I told her about, co-sponsoring this bill as well. And she looked at me, and she had the exact same reaction. She was like, "You mean I've been, technically breaking the law?" So I couldn't explain it, so I had to call the gentleman from Marietta, Mr. Teasley, to get him to explain it to her. So it's a good bill.
I appreciate you being a co-sponsor of it.
We've got a couple of folks that I want to hear from, let the committee hear from, and as has been mentioned in testimony, the Georgia Association of Realtors has worked closely with the Georgia Department of Banking and Finance on this. I want to make sure that we understand this. This is something that's agreed on. And real quickly, if Rod Carnes, who is the Deputy Commissioner for the Georgia Department of Banking and Finance, if you just briefly, tell the committee, how y'all work together, and this is actually, I believe, y'all's language.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is in our the Georgia Residential Mortgage Act, and there was an existing exemption for real estate folks. But what this does, it adds language to that existing exemption that will allow them to participate in short sales. And I think to further discuss how they were sort of crossing the mortgage broker licensing line was they could submit the offer and any factual information about the property or the neighborhood or community. But if they submitted financial information or any personal information on the seller or the borrower, then they actually were crossing the line because they were submitting financial information having to do with an existing loan, trying to modify that loan or change the terms of that loan. And what we found out was, obviously, a lot of these go through the big banks, and they were the Equator program, which is, I think, just with the real estate. I'm a little out of my area because it's not on the mortgage side, but they use the Equator program to do this. Quite honestly, these big national banks that are doing a lot of these short sales, that's the only way they would participate in these short sales, was to deal with real estate folks using the Equator program. From what I understand, they can upload all of this information to them. And so that's not something I asked around that I believe most of the mortgage folks even have access to. Obviously, we talked with the mortgage bankers, and they were okay with the language. Obviously, we support the language. We think it's a win-win because it will help the citizens with Georgia as far as continue with short sales in a legal manner.
Thank you. We appreciate you coming today. And one more person that I want to hear from, Mo Thrash with the Mortgage Bankers, Banking Association. Mo?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, I'm Mo Thrash with the Georgia Mortgage Bankers Association. And I will tell you that we're all here to move homes the best we can in the state of Georgia. Our realtor friends were having a problem, and we've dealt with the Department of Banking throughout this past year to make sure this legislation was drafted correctly that would help the realtors move these properties on. The mortgage bankers and mortgage brokers of the state still do the financing of the loans. We still do the modifications, but it allows the realtors to keep it involved in the short sale and makes it all legal. So we're delighted to be a part of this bill. We urge your positive vote on it, and I appreciate your support of it.
Thank you. We
Thank you
appreciate
very
it,
much.
Mo.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion. As a real estate broker, I'd like to thank the chairman and those who had signed on to this, because you think you look bad in stripes. The fat boys really look bad in stripes. But at this time, I'd like to make a motion as a due pass recommendation.
All right. We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion on the bill?
I had a question. I don't know if it's too late to ask it, but if the SAFE Act, which is a federal act, correct, is it going to directly conflict with the SAFE Act, since that's a federal act, and we adopted a similar?
That's a great question, Counselor. As it turns out, we had that conversation with the banking department. We adopted a version of the SAFE Act, and then this is through the rules and regs where we run into difficulty. So we have the flexibility at the state level to fold this in and resolve it without it being in conflict with federal law. But I'm sure your legal training, that's a good question, and we did have to cross that bridge. But we feel like in working with the attorneys in the banking department, and again, I was a little negligent before, and I do want to express my gratitude to Mr. Thrash, who's a longtime friend and supporter of the Realtors, for his involvement in this situation. But with all those parties involved and all the legal counsel's review, we feel like this is a solution that will work and not conflict with the federal act.
Thank you. Great question. And yes, that was something that was going on. It does not conflict with the federal. This seems to be only a problem at the state level who have done this. All right, we have a motion and we have a second. No further discussion. What's the will of the committee? Move to pass? All right. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right. All those opposed? No. It does pass unanimously. Committee, thank you, and I hope everyone gets home very quickly to their spouses and has a great Valentine's weekend. Thank you.